The sensor array on the edge of Varathy space had never screamed before. For 300 years, the station had quietly monitored the darkness between the stars. It was not a glorious assignment. It was not dangerous. Most officers who received postings there considered it punishment for mediocre careers or reward for long service, depending entirely on their personality. The station floated alone beyond the heavily populated systems of the Empire, watching empty space with endless patience, while generations of technicians rotated through its corridors and learned that nothing truly unexpected ever happened at the border anymore. The station hummed softly, day and night. Consoles blinked. Long-range sensors tracked harmless cargo vessels. Patrol craft moved in predictable lanes. The occasional comet drifted near the border and triggered brief yellow alerts that gave the younger technicians something to talk about during meals. Nothing ever happened. Then, at exactly 3:12 station time, every alarm aboard the monitoring station activated simultaneously. The sound was horrifying. Not because alarms themselves were unusual, but because the station had never produced that particular tone before. It was not a warning chime. It was not a collision alert or reactor failure signal. It was a long, uninterrupted scream generated only for catastrophic, unknown threats. Technicians were thrown from sleep. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors. Commander Thra entered the control room, still fastening the seals on his uniform, and immediately stopped moving. The massive display wall at the center of the chamber had turned completely crimson. Every border marker from Sector 7 through Sector 19 was flashing active breach warnings. Something had entered Imperial space. And whatever it was, the sensor network could barely understand it. Diagnostics, Fithra ordered immediately. Junior technician Paul obeyed so quickly that he nearly dropped his data slate. The station's systems ran through complete verification protocols, internal calibration checks, signal integrity analysis, long-range synchronization. The results appeared seconds later. All systems operational. No malfunction detected. Run it again, Vithra said. Paul did. The results remained identical. The object was real. Slowly, unease spread through the room. Vithra stepped toward the central display and examined the tracking data personally. The unidentified vessel was moving through Imperial territory at extraordinary speed while simultaneously producing interference patterns unlike anything in the Empire's databases. No registration signal. No recognized drive signature. No transponder code. No identifiable construction profile. It was not Imperial. It was not civilian. It was not listed in hostile threat archives. It was not listed anywhere. Visual feed, Vithra ordered. The long-range imaging systems struggled to stabilize. Distortion crawled across the display like static. Entire sections of the picture dissolved into black interference before finally reforming. Then the image resolved enough for everyone in the room to see it clearly. The vessel was enormous. Long. Dark. Spear-like. It seemed designed around one singular purpose: forward motion. There were no decorative structures, no recognizable architectural features. The hull absorbed surrounding light in a way that made it appear partially absent from reality itself. No visible engines. No reactor bloom. No radiation wake. Nothing. Ships were supposed to reflect sensor signals. This one consumed them. Current speed? Fithra asked quietly. Paul swallowed before answering. Then he read the numbers aloud. The commander sat down immediately. Not because he intended to. His legs simply stopped functioning properly for a moment. The acceleration bursts recorded by the station were impossible. The Empire possessed the most advanced propulsion science in known space. Entire universities existed solely to study theoretical velocity limits and relativistic stress tolerances. The numbers now appearing on the display exceeded not only practical engineering capability, but theoretical possibility itself. The object accelerated twice after entering Imperial territory. Each burst reached speeds that should not exist. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Commander Thra activated the emergency relay. "Notify Fleet Command," he said. Across the Empire, the message spread faster than the vessel itself. Fleet Admiral Cass Varen received the alert while eating breakfast inside his private residence on Vorathi Prime. By the third paragraph, he had already stopped chewing. By the fourth, he was standing. His first assumption was secret weapons development from a border civilization. He dismissed that possibility within minutes. No neighboring power possessed technology remotely close to what the report described. The Dreth Confederacy struggled to match Imperial drives even after 60 years of development. The Solari were economically powerful, but militarily conservative. The Keth did not build vessels large enough to match the sensor mass estimates. This was something else. Cass Varen contacted High Coordinator Thessaly Orvin personally. Within 20 minutes, the Imperial Council chamber was opening under emergency authority. The message was simple. Unknown vessel. Impossible speed. Unrecognized technology. No response to communications. Thessaly Orvin listened silently while Cass Varen summarized the reports. She was not easily shaken. She had managed border conflicts, trade collapses, and political crises for decades. But when she saw the acceleration figures, her expression changed slightly. Only slightly, but enough. "Mobilize Third Fleet," she ordered. Communication attempts began immediately afterward. Every known frequency, every diplomatic protocol, every recognized emergency signal. The broadcast repeated endlessly through the darkness between stars. "Unidentified vessel, you have entered Imperial territory. Identify yourself immediately. State your origin. State your destination. State your intentions." No response came back. The ship continued moving. Third Fleet assembled faster than any military formation in Imperial history. 47 warships gathered near the Helgen Drift, under the command of Admiral Drain aboard the Sovereign's Edge, the largest active combat vessel in the Empire. Drain was not easily intimidated. He had fought in border wars and pirate suppression campaigns. He understood military pressure. He understood force projection. 47 warships represented overwhelming power by any reasonable standard. The fleet formed a wall directly across the intruder's projected path. Anything approaching such a formation had two choices: stop or turn around. The unidentified ship did neither. It simply continued forward, calmly, steadily, as though 47 warships did not matter. When visual contact was finally established, silence spread across the bridge of the Sovereign's Edge. The vessel was far larger than expected. Numbers on sensor displays had failed to communicate scale properly. Seeing the ship directly was different. Its hull stretched through space like a dark blade cutting across the stars. No visible weapon ports. No identifiable engines. No running lights. No insignia. Just darkness moving with terrifying confidence. "Distance?" Drain asked. 40,000 kilometers in closing, navigation answered. Drain studied the screen carefully. The vessel showed no signs of maneuvering for combat, no weapons charging, no evasive behavior, no reaction whatsoever to the fleet formation waiting directly in its path. "Hail it again," he ordered. Communications repeated the warning signals. Still no response. Drain made a decision. Emergency light arrays flashed universal stop patterns directly toward the unknown vessel. 3 long, 3 short, 3 long. A signal recognized by nearly every spacefaring civilization in known territory. The ship ignored it. Drain escalated cautiously. 12 ship warning spread, he ordered. Energy cannons fired simultaneously across the darkness. Brilliant arcs of light exploded across open space, crossing directly in front of the vessel's path. The firepower involved could cripple most combat ships instantly. The unknown vessel flew directly through the residual energy wash without changing course even slightly. Commander Haleth checked his readings twice, then a third time. The shots impacted some kind of energy field around the hull, he said carefully. The vessel itself registered no damage. Nobody on the bridge spoke. Then the alien vessel transmitted a signal. The sound emerging from the communication system was unlike any language in Imperial archives. It possessed rhythm, repetition, and structured patterns indicating intelligence. But the translation systems failed completely. Before anyone could react further, the ship rotated slowly toward the Sovereign's edge. Every sensor aboard Third Fleet surged violently into the red. "Energy spike detected," Haleth shouted. A massive power buildup formed along the vessel's forward section. Weapon systems, and not ordinary ones. The charge climbed higher and higher until entire sensor arrays overloaded under the strain. The unknown ship pointed the fully charged weapon directly at Admiral Drain's flagship and held it there. Not firing, simply aiming, demonstrating. The message was unmistakable. "We can destroy you. We are choosing not to." Several seconds later, the energy dissipated. The ship returned to its original course and continued deeper into Imperial territory. Drain exhaled slowly. "Fleet Command is requesting orders," communications said. Drain stared at the dark vessel moving away across the display. "If warning shots accomplished nothing," he said quietly, "then full engagement only starts a war we cannot win." Meanwhile, panic spread across the Empire. The information blackout lasted 22 hours before collapsing completely. A communications technician leaked partial details to family members. Within hours, public networks were flooded with rumors about an unstoppable alien vessel moving through Imperial space. News organizations obtained blurry images from sensor archives and broadcast them endlessly. Markets fluctuated violently. Civilian travel increased dramatically. Parents removed children from schools, despite the vessel remaining far from populated systems. The Empire had spent 3,000 years as the unquestioned dominant civilization in the region. Now fear spread through its population for the first time in generations. Inside the Imperial Council chamber, translation teams worked continuously, attempting to decipher the mysterious 11-second signal transmitted before the confrontation. At the same time, Third Fleet continued shadowing the vessel from a cautious distance. Then Commander Haleth noticed something unusual. The ship was not behaving like an invading warship. It was scanning. Not military targets, not tactical formations. Everything. Stars, radiation fields, asteroid belts, planetary magnetic signatures. The sensor pulses moved outward in organized patterns like careful scientific surveys. "It's mapping the region," Haleth realized. That observation changed the tone inside the command staff almost immediately. Invaders did not stop to study mineral composition inside asteroid fields. Conquerors did not perform detailed astronomical surveys during military confrontations. Something about the vessel's behavior felt wrong for an enemy. Then came the distress beacon. A civilian freighter called the Merchant's Hope had suffered catastrophic drive failure inside a dense asteroid field nearly 16 hours earlier. The crew had broadcast emergency signals continuously while waiting for rescue. The unknown vessel altered course immediately upon detecting the beacon. Third Fleet watched in silence as the massive dark ship entered the asteroid field. Its movements were extraordinarily precise, careful, controlled, almost gentle. A section of the vessel's hull opened and extended a long, articulated docking arm toward the disabled freighter. Then, for the first time, the alien ship spoke. "Merchant vessel," said a calm voice through open communications. "We have received your distress signal. Please confirm crew status." The bridge crew aboard the Sovereign's Edge froze. The voice spoke in standard trade language. Within minutes, the alien vessel had analyzed the freighter's broadcasts and adapted its communications accordingly. The crew of the Merchant's Hope responded cautiously, while the unknown ship calmly asked technical questions about the damaged drive systems. Soon afterward, the docking arm carefully towed the stranded freighter free from the asteroid field and guided it safely into stable orbit. The Empire watched the entire rescue operation in stunned silence. This was not the behavior of conquerors. At that exact moment, the translation teams on Vorathi Prime finally decoded the original 11-second transmission. Orth, head of Imperial Intelligence, personally carried the translation into the council chamber. The room fell completely silent as he read the message aloud. "We appear to have crossed into your territory by mistake. We did not mean to cause alarm. Can you tell us where we are?" Nobody spoke for several long seconds. The terrifying vessel that had thrown the Empire into panic was not invading. It was lost. For 2 full days, the Vorathi Empire had mistaken explorers for enemies, and their first response to a request for directions had been cannon fire. Shortly afterward, direct communication was finally established between Third Fleet and the unknown vessel. A calm, female voice identified herself as Captain Yara Chen of the exploration ship Endurance. She explained that her species was called human, and that the vessel had become disoriented while navigating incomplete star charts through unexplored territory. Drain questioned her carefully regarding the confrontation. "You charged weapons directly at my flagship," he said. "You fired at us first," Chen replied evenly. "We demonstrated capability. We did not fire." There was no hostility in her tone, no anger, only direct honesty. Drain found himself unable to argue with the logic. A formal meeting was arranged in neutral space between representatives of Third Fleet and the crew of the Endurance. When Captain Chen entered the chamber, the Imperial officers experienced another surprise. She looked ordinary. No armor, no ceremonial authority markings, no visible weapons. Just an explorer trying to resolve a misunderstanding. Her officers introduced themselves calmly. First Officer Rains, Dr. Osai, Chief Science Officer. The discussions began cautiously, but gradually shifted toward curiosity rather than suspicion. Chen explained that the Endurance belonged to the Pioneer-class exploration program, a line of deep space vessels designed for multi-year expeditions into unknown regions of the galaxy. "How many ships exist in this class?" Halith asked. 7, Chen answered. Several Imperial officers relaxed slightly. Then Rains casually added, "There are other classes, of course." The room became attentive again. "How many deep space vessels does humanity operate?" Drain asked. Chen exchanged a glance with Rains. "A little over 4,000 registered long-range ships," he replied. Silence filled the chamber. The Empire had expected a small, isolated civilization. Instead, they were speaking with representatives of a species operating thousands of exploration-capable vessels throughout unknown space. Drain studied Captain Chen carefully. "You send these ships alone into unexplored territory?" "Yes." "Why?" Chen answered immediately. "Because it's there." The simplicity of the answer unsettled Drain more than any weapon demonstration. The humans did not explore from desperation. They did not expand from conquest. They explored because exploration itself mattered to them. Then Dr. Osai asked a question of her own. How long has your empire been spacefaring? 3,000 years, Halith answered proudly. Chen nodded thoughtfully. We've had spaceflight for about 100. The room became perfectly still. 100 years. In a single century, humanity had developed propulsion systems beyond imperial science, adaptive translation technologies, energy shielding capable of absorbing fleet-level attacks, and exploration vessels capable of crossing enormous regions of unknown space independently. And they had done it from a single inhabited world. One world so far, Chen corrected gently. In that moment, Admiral Drain finally understood the true significance of humanity. The Varathi Empire had dominated the region for thousands of years because no civilization had ever advanced quickly enough to rival them. Humanity had, and humanity had barely begun. Yet despite all their power, the humans had shown extraordinary restraint throughout the crisis. They had not retaliated after being attacked. They had rescued civilians without hesitation. They had continued attempting peaceful communication despite every misunderstanding. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end, both civilizations exchanged navigational archives, scientific data, and stellar mapping records. The Empire granted the Endurance temporary safe passage through Imperial territory. Before leaving, Captain Chen stood beside the airlock and looked toward the stars visible through the viewport. Your space is beautiful, she said quietly. The gas clouds near your border are incredible. The people back home are going to love the images. Then she offered Admiral Drain her hand. A simple human gesture. Firm, brief, honest. After the Endurance departed, High Coordinator Thessaly Orban contacted Admiral Drain privately. Is humanity a threat to the Empire? She asked. Drain considered the question carefully. Not today, he finally answered. Then he looked toward the stars, where the Endurance had vanished. But the more important question, he continued slowly, is what they will become in 3,000 years, and whether we want to be remembered as the civilization that first met them while they were still young. Far beyond imperial borders, the Endurance accelerated toward human space, carrying maps, recordings, and the story of first contact with an ancient galactic empire. And somewhere deep inside the Varathi council chambers, every leader in the empire understood the same terrifying truth. Humanity was not frightening because of what it was now. Humanity was frightening because of what it would eventually become. A species that crossed galaxies simply because they wanted to know what waited in the dark. A species that built impossible ships after only 1 century among the stars. A species that responded to fear with patience, and strangers in danger with kindness. Instead, she recorded a gravitational anomaly that shouldn't have been possible. Her instruments showed a mass concentration in the test chamber that corresponded to nothing visible. She powered down the apparatus. The anomaly disappeared. She powered it back up. The anomaly returned. Thrall's scales shifted, a slow, involuntary movement that Marcus had learned to read as something between discomfort and dawning comprehension. And she still thought it was an equipment malfunction? For another 2 weeks, yes. She was thorough. She recalibrated everything. She borrowed sensors from 3 other departments. She got her advisor involved, and then her advisor's advisor. By the time they were confident the results were real, there were 11 people in that lab, all of them still half convinced they were missing something obvious. Marcus leaned against the window frame. It took them almost a month to accept what they were seeing. 1 month, the Drath attaché said. The grinding rock sound came again. quieter this time, and Marcus was no longer certain it expressed skepticism. It might have been something more like awe. 1 month, he confirmed, and then another 6 months to understand the mechanism well enough to reproduce it reliably, and then another 6 months to build something stable enough to demonstrate. 18 months total from the first anomalous reading to the device you saw on that auction floor. There was a long silence. The seraph from the Galactic Council stood perfectly still, translucent eyes open, and Marcus assumed, recording everything with whatever biological or technological equipment it carried. Thrall spoke carefully. The standard models of physics, the ones shared with your species when you join the galactic community, do not predict this effect. They specifically exclude the possibility. Yes, Marcus agreed. That's actually the most interesting part. He set down his coffee and walked to the suite's window. The star field beyond was astonishing, as it always was. Millions of points of light, each one a sun, most of them orbited by worlds, many of those worlds inhabited. He had grown up on a planet where the sky was blue and the stars were something you saw only at night, and he still hadn't entirely adjusted to living in space, where the stars were everywhere all the time, constant and indifferent and magnificent. When humanity joined the galactic community, he said, everyone was extraordinarily generous. You shared your science with us, your physics, your mathematics, your cosmological models, your understanding of how the universe works at every scale. We learned faster than light travel from you, gravity manipulation, energy generation, propulsion systems, medical technology, all the fundamental knowledge that every spacefaring civilization depends on. And we're genuinely grateful for that. It accelerated our development by centuries, maybe more. We welcomed you as equals, the Helix Syndicate's Venn representative said. Her surface rippled in a pattern Marcus had come to associate with mild defensiveness. We gave you access to knowledge that took us millions of years to accumulate. You did, and something interesting happened when you did. Marcus turned back to face them. When you gave us your science, you also gave us your assumptions, your frameworks, your intuitions about what the universe allows. And those assumptions are built on the accumulated experience of how your species, your many species, perceive and model reality. And humans perceive it differently, Pip said quietly. He uncurled slightly in his chair. His large eyes were very focused now. Humans evolved on a planet with a specific set of physical conditions, facing a specific set of survival pressures. Our visual system processes certain kinds of information differently. Our intuition about spatial relationships, about scale, about what constitutes a meaningful pattern, it's not better or worse than yours, but it is different. And when Sarah was building her simulation, she made what any of your physicists would immediately recognize as a mathematical error. She applied a function to a class of particles that, according to established theory, those particles cannot participate in. The Venn representative rippled again. How could an incorrect function produce correct results? Because the function wasn't describing the particles she thought she was modeling, Pip said slowly. He unfolded further from the chair, his body language shifting into something that Marcus read as intellectual excitement barely contained. She was describing something else, something adjacent, something the standard models don't account for because they weren't looking in that direction. Exactly, Marcus pointed at Pip. She was thinking like an outsider. She'd learned your science, but she hadn't fully internalized all the assumptions underneath it. She didn't have 10,000 years of accumulated intuition telling her that certain questions weren't worth asking. She asked the question anyway, by accident, and she got an answer. Thrall moved, a slow turning of her entire body that brought her several steps closer to Marcus. Her scales had shifted to a deeper bronze. You're telling me, she said, that your ignorance was an advantage. In this specific case, yes. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the person who doesn't know something is impossible is the person who goes ahead and does it anyway. Another long silence. This one had a different quality than the previous ones, more thoughtful, less stunned. Marcus could see the beings in his suite processing what he'd told them, each in their own way. The Drath attaché had gone very still. The Ven representative was moving in slow, deliberate patterns. Pip had produced a small recording device from somewhere in his dense fur and was speaking rapidly into it in a language Marcus didn't recognize. "The device you sold," Thrall said at last. "How many more do you have?" "That's classified. Can you produce them in sufficient quantities for commercial deployment?" "Also classified." The Drath attaché took one heavy step forward. His chitin armor made a sound like a closing vault. "You must understand," he said, his translator rendering his tone with careful diplomacy, "the implications of what you've introduced. Dark matter manipulation could transform warfare, construction, resource extraction, navigation. Every major faction in this galaxy will seek this technology, and some of them will not be polite about it." "Is that a threat?" Marcus asked. He kept his voice even. "It's a warning," Thrall said quickly. She shot the Drath attaché a sharp look. The universal expression, it turned out, of someone telling a colleague to dial it back. "Mr. Chen, the Galactic Council has maintained relative peace for thousands of years to a carefully managed balance of capabilities. When one species achieves a significant and sudden technological advantage, history suggests the consequences are rarely peaceful." "We're aware," Marcus said. "We are also aware that humanity is, at this moment, small, relatively militarily limited, and surrounded by civilizations that could flatten us if they chose to. We are not operating under any illusions about our current position." "Then what is your intention?" Pip asked. Marcus picked up his coffee again. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway. "We're going to be very careful," he said. "We're going to license the technology in stages, to multiple factions simultaneously, structured so that no single power gains a disproportionate advantage. We're going to use the revenue to build relationships, establish treaties, and make ourselves useful enough to enough people that the cost of attacking us outweighs any benefit." He paused. "And we're going to keep doing what we apparently do well." "Which is?" the Ven representative asked. "Research." Marcus looked out at the stars again. "If we stumbled onto dark matter manipulation by accident, while a doctoral student was debugging her code, what else might we find? What other questions has the galactic community stopped asking because the model said they weren't worth asking? What other assumptions might be wrong?" The implications settled over the room like a weather change. Thrall's scales had gone very dark. The seraph from the Galactic Council finally moved. A small shift in posture that might have been significant in ways Marcus couldn't read. "You're making yourselves indispensable," Thrall said. "We're making ourselves partners," Marcus corrected. "Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy, Ambassador. We've been out here for 30 years. We're still figuring out which end is up. What we want is to survive, to grow, to belong to this community in a way that's good for everyone." He set down the cold coffee. "The best way we've found to do that is to be more valuable as collaborators than as subjects, or as threats." The delegation exchanged looks across multiple species in communication styles. Whatever passed between them in those looks, Marcus couldn't fully read, but he had made his argument. The rest, for now, wasn't his to control.